Tracy has a spread in the morning paper and she's all excited about it. That makes a total of one of them.
Tracy, it said in the article that you were the star of the show.
Oh, sorry. That's my silly publicist. He likes to put me on a pedestal.
Oh, then what does he like to do?
I'm sure it won't happen again, will it, Tracy?
Joyce is grateful to John for standing up for her.
Oh, I was only being fair to a brilliant and gifted actress.
Well, thank you again. Normally, after a compliment like that, I'd be bracing myself, thinking you had an ulterior motive.
You would?
Uh-huh.
Good, brace yourself.
Because he does. His mother is coming to visit. Around the time that they split up, she had a heart attack. To spare her health, John hasn't told her that he and Joyce are divorced. He wants her to come over and play house for a few hours while his mother is here.
Well, I guess I'll have to tell her. Just remember, if the news is too much for her, it'll be on your head.
John, don't do this to me.
Joyce, all I'm asking is that for 2 hours you let me come into your home and pretend to be your husband.
All right. Why not? As long as it'll make an old woman happy.
Yes, and it'll make Mother happy, too.
Forget it, Joyce. You walked into that one face first. Mother arrives, we tell her Mitzi is a live-in maid, and John has to reimburse her for the cab fare she just paid. Joyce described her as cheap, a snoop, and a neat freak.
I see the place still looks the same. Oily.
She's correct on all counts. Even John can't argue.
Well, children, I have a little surprise for you.
Oh?
Since I haven't seen the two of you for over 2 years, I've decided to spend the night with you.
How wonderful! And what a wonderfully appropriate thing to spring on people whom you previously told you were only staying 2 hours. Rather than spend the night with Joyce, John has decided to tell his mother the truth. Joyce says, "You won't go through with it, you're chicken."
Mother, how do you feel?
Oh, wonderful. Never felt better in my life.
Good. Sit down, Mother. I'm afraid I have some bad news. Listen, Mom.
Well, I never listen to anything those doctors say anyway.
They say she's in perfect health, but at her age she could go poof at any time. So what's this bad news?
Mother, I hate to say this, but Joyce and I are going to bed.
I thought you had some bad news.
That was it.
There's a love seat sort of bench in Joyce's bedroom, and John will sleep on it. We must follow the rules, so Mother will barge in multiple times and force John to jump into the bed and pretend. We couldn't come up with something more imaginative than that, but I've come to expect it from this show. They'll decide as long as they're there they may as well have sex, and she'll barge in and prevent that too. It's trite and really not funny. Next morning, they're filling the others in and telling them not to mention the divorce.
How do you do? Your son is a wonderful couple. I mean, they're both wonderful couples. Joyce, I'm going to crack. I know it.
Would you like to sit down?
If anybody's going to spill it, it'll be Fletcher.
It's a pleasure working with such wonderful people, especially Joyce Whitman and John Elliott. They work so well together that you'd never know they were divorced.
I stand corrected. John says, I have to tell you something that she just told you.
Mother.
I know. You don't have to tell me. You and Joyce are divorced. I've known that for years.
That's a good trick since they've only been divorced for 2 years, but what matters is she already knows. She came to see them anyway in hopes of reigniting some sparks and getting them back together.
You're a dear, dear woman.
And besides, why should I fork out $40 for a hotel room?
I don't know, maybe to avoid putting your son and his ex-wife in an impossibly awkward position. But we know they're not the important ones here, and $40 is $200 in today's money. I admit it was nice to see a mother-in-law story that didn't involve a vicious, spiteful woman who hates her daughter-in-law. Quite the contrary, Mrs. Elliot thinks the world of Joyce and would like to have her back in the family. That was different, I'll give him that. But one small difference isn't enough to save a show that's built entirely on comedic cliches. It's too bad we didn't have a better script, because our guest star was somewhat unique. Elizabeth Kerr wanted to be an actress her whole life, but she had to wait until she was done raising a family before she could give it a try. By the time she made her stage debut, she was already a grandmother. She did a fair amount of TV work, including a recurring role on Mork and Mindy, but her first love was the stage. She spent the lion's share of her acting time there, and pretty well lived happily ever after until she died in 2000 at the age of 87. She's living proof of Betty White's statement that you see here on my shirt, "You're never too old to do anything." She made the most of what she had to work with here, and she walked a nice balance between the doting mother and the annoying house guest. Even so, the story surrounding her is weak at best, unbelievable at worst. Does she read newspapers, listen to radio, watch TV news? Then she heard the announcement of their divorce, because as far back as the dawn of time, celebrity breakups are big stories. There's no way she couldn't have known unless she lived in a cave on top of a mountain somewhere. Just don't tell her that's a possibility. When she finds out how cheap it is, she might give it a try. To John for standing up. Next morning, they're filling the others in and filling the others in. Okay, get the inflection. When she finds out how cheap it was, it is. She might give it a try. And $40 is $200. Couldn't have known unless she lived in a cape on. Really?